Now we're recording.
I always forget. I will find out where I believe, I don't know where Sarah uploads them, but I'll find that out and, yeah, so I will, find out where specifically they're uploaded so you can have access to them. And yeah, like if you're gone, you miss them, by all means, check them out. They're uploaded somewhere. Okay, so we're going to finish our conversation about Messianic Judaism today. We're going to go over a couple more, like, I would say, anxieties that Jews have about the Messianic movements and Messianic congregations. There's just a couple more I want to cover. And then I want to sort of like explore how I've been thinking about it, how, whether or not we should have these anxieties. And I know that we're going to have a very diverse range of opinions on this, and that's okay, right? We can have different opinions on this subject matter in this course. I'm okay with that. And then if we have time, we'll start talking about our new unit of study, which will be basically other alternative Judaisms. And I have this old lecture that I sort of refer to as Jew religious movements, right? Like new religious movements, basically other non-normative Judaisms, some of which the mainstream Jewish community considers to be Jewish, others which are like Chabad, for instance, others which are generally not considered to be Jewish by the mainstream community, and some that are sort of on the fence, right, like Kabbalah and things like that. And we're going to talk a little bit about Baba Ramdas, who's one of my favorite Jews turned Hindu gurus. So I don't think we'll get to all of that today. We'll probably go into it a little bit more next week. But yeah, that's what we're going to be covering. Okay. All right. So I want to quickly draw your attention to this image. Do any of you know your medieval Christian iconography? And know what's happening here?
That's a Christ in the middle, isn't it?
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, he's an important third of it. No,
That's the Sermon on the Mount.
it's not the Sermon on the Mount. No, this is actually a sort of a supernatural event that happens later on.
It appears that Jesus is pushing Moses down the mountain.
Okay, so yeah, that's actually not Moses who's going down the mountain. That's Peter, the apostle, who's fallen down on. Basically, they have discovered in this particular image, it's not Armageddon, it's called the Transfiguration of Jesus. This is when Jesus's divinity, I believe it's in the book of Acts, it's not in the Gospels. This is when Jesus's divinity, that's my understanding, but I'll have to check on that. When his divinity is made known in the Christian narrative. But you were right to say, is that Moses falling down the mountain? No, these are apostles, right, on the bottom. But this is Moses right here on the left. The fellow on the left is Moses, and the fellow on the right is the prophet Isaiah. So why would Moses and the prophet Isaiah be, not Isaiah, Elijah, that's Elijah. Why would Moses and the prophet Elijah be depicted here in this particular configuration? What do you think?
Elijah is the harbinger of the Messiah.
Yes, exactly. John says Elijah is the harbinger of the Messiah. And then Moses is the giver of the Mosaic law, the covenant. So knowing that, the apostles, put them out of your mind for a minute, they're just sort of, window dressing in this particular icon because they're mere mortals and they cannot stand to look upon the glory of Christ the divine. So why are Moses, John said Elijah, and Elijah basically represents he heralds the coming of the Messiah, and then why would Moses be here? What do you think? And if you're online, you can shout out. Okay, I will give the mic to John.
Well, from what I suspect, especially because it's on the slide 2%, is that Moses is there because he's bowing towards Jesus, because according to Christian theology, Jesus supplants what he gave.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exactly the reason. And I need to work on making my slides like a little less on the nose, I guess, and obvious. Yeah. But that's exactly what's happening in the Transfiguration. He, basically, what the Christian account is doing here, which the Christian scriptures are doing, is they're saying that Jesus is the Messiah and is recognized as the Messiah, and but not just by Elijah, but also by Moses, which means that his covenant with the Jewish people, and then later on with Gentiles, supersedes Moses's covenant, meaning that the covenant that we as Jews have with God through Moses giving the Torah on Mount Sinai, becomes obsolete. The new covenant of Jesus' sacrifice through, by dying on the cross and washing clean the sins of human beings, this is the new covenant. So that necessarily implies that the Jewish covenant is obsolete and that Jews are doing something wrong. So what's happening here, he's being heralded as both Messiah, but also as divine, because that's why the apostles are sort of falling down on the ground. But Moses is also sort of looking over, saying, no, this is right, my covenant's obsolete, you need to follow this guy now. That, in a nutshell, is supersessionism. And this is one of the biggest anxieties that Jews encounter. I should say anxieties, I think that diminishes the concern. One of the biggest points of contention that Jews encounter and feel when we encounter Messianic Jews and the Messianic movement, and also many Christians as well. Daryl, here you go.
Looking at something there, I may stand up and come a little closer.
Oh, please, take the podium.
Oh, look at this. Well, this one's okay. He's about ready to slide off the rock. He's really looks stable, relatively stable. He looks stable. So, am I just seeing things in the thing?
I'm not an art historian, so I don't know if there is any significance to the stance that Elijah and Moses and Jesus have taken. I think it might just be an artistic decision. But honestly, this is not something that I'm familiar with. I'm not familiar with medieval artistry. Beyond just to say that the image here in this famous image of the Transfiguration, this captures the conception of supersessionism or replacement theology. So just, yes. Here, wait, let me give you the mic.
Can you explain a little further what the term transfiguration means?
So again, so this is like really deep Christian theology. My understanding is this is where Jesus comes to show how he is divine. He's transfigured into a divine figure. Yeah, right. He crosses from being an ordinary human. Not that he always was a divine figure, but in like public, basically, he becomes divine. Right. That's pretty much that's my understanding of what the transfiguration is.
So question for this.
Yeah,
sorry.
You're saying that Moses and Jesus, they're saying that as Jews were not accepting Jesus and it came up like this, that it should be considered, and Jews said no. So is it kind of like taught that, do you know, do you understand what I'm saying? Is it taught? Yes. That's it.
Yeah, is the transfiguration and supersession yes,
Okay.
100% yes, almost universally. It sometimes will not be framed in most mainstream churches, be they Protestant or Catholic. Most mainstream churches will not frame this as saying the Jews, they have this obsolete form of, and therefore they're rejecting Jesus and they're a problem. And we have to figure out the solution to how to deal with them. And I'm using that language intentionally.
Because it makes us
Yeah.
feel bad.
Yes, it makes us look very bad. Yes, it absolutely makes us bad. Most churches will not do that. You're not going to hear that. But most churches will also not jettison their belief, because core to Christian belief is that Jesus comes to fulfill the law within his body. And because human beings, ordinary human beings cannot, actually, I have this right here. Right? So why is it obsolete? And then I'll sort of circle back to explain how Christians still engage with this. Why is it obsolete, right? It's obsolete because humans are defiled by original sin. Original sin, for those of you who don't know what that is, it basically means that Adam and Eve, when they disobeyed God. All human beings for all time were tainted by sin, and therefore, at our core, we are evil. At best, we are given to bad impulses, and that's where we're going to lean without any sort of intervention. At worst, we are all evil to the core, right? So God gave Moses the Torah in order to try to bring some law to lawless human beings and to his people in particular, who were a quote stiff-necked people, stubborn, or seen as stubborn or portrayed that way, always falling away from God. And so God decided, well, clearly they're not doing it, right? They're not following the Torah, and more to the point, most people can't do this. Most people cannot follow every single one of the 613 commandments. They just can't do it, right? It's very difficult. And then, of course, there's interpretations of how, like, for instance, if you are attracted to somebody and looking at them lustfully, Jesus sort of portrays that as being sin. So these are things that most people are just unable to, like, not do that, right? And of course, Judaism doesn't view that as a sin. But because of that, all human beings are defiled by original sin and are going to continue to sin no matter what. And because human beings, Jews in particular, can't live up to the covenant, everybody falls short. And so the only thing that washes us clean of sin is the sacrifice of Jesus himself, right? His dying, his being crucified. That's the only thing. So if you accept that he was crucified for the sin of human beings, and you accept that he's the Savior and the Messiah, then that brings about a type of a purity and absolution from sin, provided you don't do it anymore. So this is basic Christianity in a nutshell. Now that is the core of Christian belief, right? Not all Christians today are going to be as focused on the Jewish component of it, but very few of them will interrogate it critically and say, maybe this has led to 2,000 years of oppression. Very few of them will do that. But of course, it has been supersessionism that has led to that. And most Christian churches, most pastors, with a few exceptions, have not chosen to critically engage with that. And more of them, in fact, are starting to consciously embrace it, and more so than they have in a generation or two. And we'll talk about that shortly. Okay, so Faith asks, if the transfiguration happened at the time of his death. It happened after. Yeah, it happens after his return. When he returns from death. Yeah. Okay? All right, so this often, I say this manifests culturally rather than doctrinally. I sort of
Just want to make sure
touched
they
on
can
this.
see you.
What's that?
I was just trying to make sure they could see you, but now I'm like,
We can't, we're staring at the wall.
that's
Oh,
okay.
no, I'm so sorry.
No,
Why didn't you say something?
I was content to stare at the wall.
Same.
I love you guys. Yeah, I had a feeling, but then I wasn't 100% sure. Sorry to, yeah.
The religious studies radio hour.
It's the Religious Studies Radio Hour. Oy vey, you people. All right.
I know, so if you like staring at the wall, listening to like critical analysis of religion, I have some great religious studies podcast for you.
Okay. Well, I'm not so sure why for some, I'm going to stop the share real quick just for 10 seconds so I can make sure the angle is correct and you guys can actually see each other. Hi. Okay. There we go. And then I'm just going to like pop over here and reshare. Sorry. You can continue. I just derailed your whole darn thing. Well, now I have to share the screen. I got you.
Oh man, we're top notch tonight.
Guys, I love you all.
We want Sarah back.
Love you guys.
I have a change from what you said, my own way of changing it a little bit. I adopt things in my own way. Instead of supersessionalizing, so that we are absolute in our thinking, we're sinful people. But how about this? How about this? Where it says Jews and all humans fall short. How about we fall a little bit short a little bit obsolete, maybe not completely. You know, we're not as good as supersessionalizing, but maybe almost. You
Yeah.
know, how about that?
I mean, Sherry, that was a very Jewish approach, right? The Jewish approach is that we fall short, we miss the mark, and we atone for that by asking for forgiveness of those whom we harmed, and by atoning to God and to ourselves on Yom Kippur. And when I say to ourselves, you know what I mean by that, like making it all right within our own hearts in communication with God. That is not a Christian way of looking at it. The Christian way of looking at it is that these are human beings who are already flawed, and there is nothing that flawed human beings can do that can change the atonement that God provides. And God only provides atonement by accepting this sacrifice and this covenant. That's the problem. So yes, I agree with you, and I would say that everyone at this table does, and I would say most Jews agree with you, but the problem is that Christians who think about it regularly, that's not how they look at it. And I don't think you can convince them otherwise.
I think Sherry just proved that the scientific method is Jewish. Yeah. You make adjustments. Yom Kippur is the biggest adjustment of the year.
Yom Kippur is the biggest adjustment of the year. I like that. Okay, so moving on, like I've been explaining this doctrinally, but I want to sort of highlight how deeply embedded this is in Christian consciousness. This is not just about people who go to church regularly, they regularly go to mass, and they come to whatever classes the priest or the pastor is teaching, and maybe they've gone to seminary, or maybe they're clergy themselves. In fact, among mainline Protestants and even some Catholics, you're unlikely, many of these pastors are actually going to have some trouble with it if they've studied it. Not all of them, but they've studied it deeply, and they're like, this may be problematic. But nevertheless, this is not strictly doctrinal. This has fundamentally become cultural. So you see this, we will spend a lot of time talking about conservative Christians, and the most messianics fall into that realm. And so many most evangelicals do as well, who may, and radical traditionalist Catholics, and they probably are looking at this doctrinally and saying, yes, those Jews have rejected this, but they rejected the covenant that supersedes Moses' covenant, and that's a problem. But the issue is that this is a belief that occurs among progressive Christians as well. So you will find progressive Christians, who many of us agree with politically, I will give you all the mic momentarily, who will say, they're going to look at this and they'll say things like, I'm not concerned about the book of Revelation, I'm not concerned about the transfiguration, I'm concerned about the Beatitudes, about the Sermon on the Mount, where Jesus says, blessed are the poor, blessed are the meek, blessed are the peacekeepers. That's the Jesus I believe in, not that Old Testament God. That's the God I believe, not that Old Testament God who killed off all of the Egyptians, right? And that's a form of supersessionism as well. The idea that Jesus brings peace, but the God that we worship, ignoring, of course, I've heard actual progressive Christians say this, ignoring the fact that Pharaoh killed all the Hebrew babies to begin with, and the slavery and everything else, and ignoring the fact that many Jews look at this as allegorical, they'll say, my God is not a God that would do that. My God is a God of the Sermon on the Mount. Meaning that the Sermon on the Mount, the attitudes that Jesus that they see as authentically Christian, or the authentic Christ rather, that supersedes this quote unquote Old Testament God. That is a form of cultural supersessionism.
Yeah, I've definitely seen sometimes progressive Christians talking a lot of oh, as a Christian, you shouldn't be homophobic because Jesus came to replace the old laws and stuff like that. And they also really don't like it when you point out that's really anti-Semitic to say. Because it's so are you saying that Jews should be homophobic?
Absolutely.
I wanted to bring up the subject, but if you're going to cover this, please tell me, Sean, and proceed.
Yeah.
Are you gonna talk about expiation of the self-sin as promulgated by the different religions? Because we're talking about, Jesus came and washed away our sins. I'm thinking, I know the Catholics, can say, I don't know the whole thing, but I know they can say certain prayers to expiate. I don't know about Protestant, how they expiate their.
Yeah.
Okay. Sin, so if you're gonna, is that a?
I'll tell you right now. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I'll tell you right now, like, what are some of the differences? Well, first of all, we do it too. Expiation just means like getting rid of one's sin or pleading to a deity to help you relieve yourself of sin. We do this on Yom Kippur. We also do this when we, so the short, the short confession, right? When we hit our, we say, Shamnu. That is the specific ritual of expiation that we engage in. So, yeah, so cheerfully, and we're very to a Johnson tune.
Hey, we slowed it down this year, yo.
Yeah, we did slow it down.
Wow.
Bring me on this year.
So your question, Faith, is how do different Christians engage with that?
How do they expiate?
Okay, so and again, speaking very broadly here, because there's billions of Christians in the world. But broadly speaking, Catholics they go to confession, and then there's been some form of penance to do, and then they would go and take communion. And then that would, as long as they are also truly apologizing in their hearts, right, that would cover them. And it has to be recognition. If I'm taking communion and saying, oh, this is the blood of Christ, this is the body of Christ, then you're accepting that covenant with Jesus, right? Protestants, one of the main issues that especially not just Lutherans, but like not Lutherans at all, but later Protestants, many American evangelicals had with this is saying that itself is an empty ritual. How can we condemn other people when we're letting Catholics do this? That's not truly Christian. So the only way to expiate sin is to pray and ask for forgiveness and try not to do the sin again. But recognizing that you can't get rid of it. There's no way to make yourself clean. So the only thing you can possibly do is accept Jesus as your savior. Right? So there isn't.
Accepting Jesus expiates the sin?
So faith has to just accepting him expiates the sin. Yeah. If you truly are doing it, right? Oh, I think I just
You killed the
no, I didn't
battery.
kill it. I think the battery's dead.
You're talking too much about Jesus.
Let's see how long this lasts. The battery just died. Hopefully it lasts a bit longer. Okay. So yeah. From a many Protestant perspectives, that's what does it. That also is what does it. In Roman Catholicism, you don't necessarily if you messed up and you can't get communion, then the only thing you can do is ask God, right? That's the only thing.
Well, it depends on whether it's a mortal or a demon.
Yes. And I just lost the
Okay, so talk near the screen
all
for
right.
a little while.
Yeah, can I switch places with you and I'll just I can run this. I can see about running. Yeah.
Yeah, just here, go ahead and you can walk forward at least so everyone can see you.
Well, how am I gonna hold the screen?
Yeah, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Figure out the battery
Yeah.
situation.
Okay, so for folks online, our battery went dead on the mic, so I'm gonna sit down here for a minute and I'll just run the class from here while Jenna gets
Where is Mark, for goodness sakes?
I know, where is Mark? Seriously. You would think. You're right. He has like a little apartment. He has behind there's a little rectory behind the
Hole in the baseboard.
hole in the baseboard. Oy vey. All right. So does that answer your question?
Penance, and penance, prayer. And say about Protestants again, they just.
I mean, it's when you hear Protestants say, "Oh, I have a personal relationship with Jesus," right? The personal relationship means that they're just praying to him. So there's lots of Protestants there, and there are, if you go to an Episcopalian or Anglican church and you don't know any different, it's going to look Catholic. It's not going to look different from most Catholics, especially high Anglican. Same thing with Lutheranism. If you don't know any better, a Lutheran service will not look that different from a Catholic service. But when you start, there are major differences, but if you know nothing about Christianity, right, it will look very similar. But if you go to a Pentecostal service, it's going to be very, very different, right? Yeah. Other questions before I move on? Okay. So let's get into the next sort of concern that many Jews have. And I'm already I'm kind of regretting this, this language that I've used. This language is from a few years ago. Where there was more of a fear about what the Messianics could do to our community. I would say right now, over the past, 4 years since I gave this lecture publicly, it's shifted to anger. I would say that really the genuine emotion that when most Jews think about the Messianic movements, the emotion tends to be anger. So I'm sort of amending my language here. So there's also a fear or an anger related to attrition or related to the effect that Messianics might have on our demographics. And that makes sense because the stark reality is that our numbers appear to be dwindling, right? Dwindling, right? Or at least stagnant. They at least appear stagnant. Oh, yeah, so, okay.
Like stuck.
Okay, all right, there we go. Okay, there you go.
Now you can keep that.
Yeah. So our numbers appear to be stagnant, right? I think we've sat globally at 14.5 million people for at least a decade, probably longer. There's modest increases, but not much. There's also a fear among some segments of the Jewish community about intermarriage, although this is not a fear of mine, but that's a story for another day. But the point is that we all recognize that we have a demographic issue. Just look at the number of people that show up to Shabbat on a weekly basis compared to the number of people who showed up 5 years ago, and compared to the number of people who showed up 10 years ago, and so on and so forth. We cannot blame all of it on the pandemic, right? A lot of it can be blamed on the pandemic, a lot of it, but this was happening anyway, right? We talk about synagogue mergers, we talk about synagogue closures. We are concerned about how the demographic shift away, towards older generations. This is on our minds as Jews. And so the fear and angst and anger over Messianic movements taps into that anxiety over our numbers, right? And I think it might be worth having a conversation. It might be worth having a conversation sometime about how we shouldn't be entirely focused on numbers. That might diminish when we worry about the quantity of Jewish bodies who are in the shul, that sometimes maybe it might diminish the quality of the spiritual offerings that we're giving. That's a conversation we're having, to be sure. Maybe not for tonight, but it's a conversation we're having. But the reality is that everyone thinks about this in the Jewish community, and this concern taps into it. I like to sort of highlight the situation here, right? I forgot that I wrote that. A Jewish end cap in the American marketplace. I like that. It's like you go into a Passover, you go into a supermarket, and there's a little end cap, right, of Jewish stuff. So that's why I put that there. But so I want to ask, why is it, no, yeah, and why is there couscous here? Why is there matzah on? Yeah, exactly. Or exactly. So can anyone, I want to ask you to sort of highlight this a little bit more. Can anyone name all the synagogues in Orange County? Anyone? You want to try, Faith? Here you go.
There's CBI in Tustin, Congregation of the Name of Israel. There's, on Synagogue Road, there is Shir HaMa'alot. There's University Synagogue, and there's Beth Jacob Orthodox. Did you say, okay, we are, the Chabad, group in Newport Beach. There's one in Santa Ana, Beth Shalom, Beth Emmett, which shares space with a Christian group, and that's in my area. I think that's Anaheim. Then Beth David in Westminster.
I think.
That's out.
You want to add more, John?
Yes, there's Temple Bat Yam.
Oh, but yeah,
There,
right away.
Congregation B'nai Tzedek.
Yeah, there's that.
Then there's Chabad in Huntington Beach. There's probably like 5 or 6 others. So
There's Bethel.
Bethel. There's, okay, you just screwed me up. So that one was the formerly Natalie Young.
Yeah. Also,
Oh, yeah, you're
right.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There.
Oh, you want to keep, okay, all right.
I'm gonna keep trying.
Don't rush, sorry, don't rush you. I'm worrying that our cadence, we just, I think my point's been made, though, that's the point.
That was it.
What's that?
That's it, because otherwise you're gonna start getting to Long Beach and those
Oh,
are,
is that it? Okay.
yeah.
Well,
you're good.
we forgot the minions though, like Isaiah, Surf City, right?
And there is, of course, Catella Deli.
That was false normative. Sorry. So my point though, is we can do that. Now, name all the churches. Never mind in Orange County, name all the churches in Fountain Valley, right? And even if you knew them, could you really do it? Like, they're everywhere. And we serve,
Open every day.
there's congregants here at CBT who come from South Orange County, there's congregants who come from Long Beach, there's congregants who come from, you said Anaheim, right? Jenna and I come from Cypress, which is closer to Beth David, right? So, I mean, yeah. Oh, yeah, you mentioned the full, okay. So, but my point is that there is a church on every single street corner, right? And so our concern as Jews is that as we fall away, if our kids fall away, if they fall away from Judaism, and their kids are not raised in it, the concern then becomes, where do they go if they want some religion? Because it's really hard to find a synagogue near you. It's super easy to find a church, right? And the reality is that we just pale in comparison to all the other Christian organizations. And so there's this fear, an understandable fear, that if a group is actively trying to convert us away under the auspices of being Jewish, there's this fear that they're going to have success and it's going to affect us in a really serious manner. Daryl.
Not sure that having a church in every corner makes it all that convenient for people to find the church. A Lutheran would be caught dead in the Methodist church, the Methodist would be caught dead in the Catholic church, etc.
You're wrong, actually. So, and I'll tell you why you're wrong. Yes, people who were raised, especially a couple of generations back, who were raised Lutheran or Methodist or Catholic, then you'll still find some who are like, I'll never speak to those Methodists, right? You can still find people like that. But the question is, what about their kids, right? Because there's plenty of people that are like, I'll never step foot in a Reformed synagogue. I'm Orthodox all the way, right? But what about, or not Orthodox, I'm conservative all the way. But what about their kids and their kids' kids, right? That's where the concern raises. So if your family are come from a long line of Methodists, and then you don't really raise your kids with any sort of religion, or you're just sort of loosely Christian, or maybe you move somewhere where there isn't a Methodist school, but there's a Presbyterian one, and basically it's the same. If you're not a theologian, you're a theologian, it's a big difference. If you're not a theologian, it's basically the same. And so you just go to a Christian church, no big deal.
Just a quick anecdote, but I once had a Presbyterian tell me basically that as she was about to set foot into a Methodist church, that they're basically the same.
Yeah, you're not gonna find many sort of lay Presbyterians who are strict Calvinists. And even among Calvinism means predestination, which is sort of the foundation of Presbyterianism. Okay, Daryl and John.
I would make an addendum though. They quote non-denominational, unquote Christian churches are the scary ones because they try to appeal to just about everybody.
I would agree with you, actually. And it's not just they appeal to everyone, it's that their social outlook, their theology, which is boiled down to a very robust supersessionism, and their political and social outlook are a threat to people who are not them. And that is something that I want you to hold in your mind, because we're gonna come back to that.
Oh yeah, that sort of line blurring also you see a lot in the Jewish world too. It's like, and you'll see people online like self-ID themselves as reformative or as conservadox, et cetera, et cetera. And like, you'll see lots of people, like sometimes I'll do this too, like spend Friday night here and then Saturday morning at B'nai Israel. Or like sometimes go to a Orthodox shul or something like that. And so I think a lot of it's also like, because you see a lot of people, well, for the longest time, the scare tactic was, oh, if you're a Reformed Jew, your grandchildren will be Christians and stuff like that. And you're starting to see that sort of thing, and like the fear of attrition and stuff like it isn't necessarily panning out.
Yeah. You're right, it isn't panning out, and yet there's this fear that remains, right? And I'm arguing that the fear specifically aimed at Messianics is a little bit overblown for them themselves, right? I would argue that the fear of the folks you mentioned, or the folks who are under the umbrella, Daryl, is sort of non-denominational Christians who are under the umbrella of evangelicalism. I would say that is where the fear is better placed. I would say they're more of a problem too. I don't think that there are that many Jews who are being picked up by the Jews for Jesus. Yes, the Jews for Jesus were started by Baptist evangelists. That's true. And the purpose of the Jews for Jesus, the ones who are the most public, is to convert Jews. And they do this through deceptive means. They do it through deceptive theologies. They do it through deceptive ad campaigns and marketing campaigns. They argue to the deceptive manner. That's all true. But they are just one segment of this larger Messianic community. The reality is that we do not lose that many people to Messianics. We lose people to secularism. And I'm not saying that I'm secular. I would say to Jenna, like, I am so sick of the holidays. And I am. I want to recede into secularity. I don't want to deal with Simchat Torah. I want to do nothing, aside from the fact that I have this job. I want to do nothing until Hanukkah. I don't have an issue. I don't have an issue. You know, it was like funny when you say that. Faith says, is this a mixed marriage? Before we were married, Rabbi Myers, who married us, was concerned that was the thing. That was what we were. We were a mixed marriage. That I was like.
Because you studied Christianity.
Yeah, because I studied Christianity, and because I do have this strong secular streak, and I'm also sort of a smart ass. And so, what does a Jew look like? John said you look Jewish. Also, Ashkenazi Norman.
You look Ashkenazi.
I look Ashkenazi, you're right. Okay, so hold on. So the problem here is that we are viewing the Jews for Jesus as the standard for Messianism, and they are not the standard for Messianic Jews. They're not. Now, that doesn't mean that Messianic Jews' beliefs aren't problematic or annoying. They are, but they're not all Jews for Jesus. Here you go.
You know, we were talking about all this and something came to my mind. I haven't seen it recently, but there was a minister who was on the radio. This is probably a lot of years ago. He sent out flyers and he went door to door. And the first question he has, are you related? Are you going to connect to a religious organization? If they said yes, he said, thank you, and left. He said all he was looking for were people who didn't have a religious connection. They were obviously Christian, a religious connection. Even his flyers sound like real estate. Don't come to me if you already got a church.
So I want to go over, we want to put this together and go over some answers. I think I've come across to you as someone who is not as concerned about Messianics as so much of the Jewish community is. And I know that not everyone agrees with me. And I know that there are people who started this class, and I think we're definitely, and we'll come back when we start talking about more traditional Jewish stuff, because they're annoying and angering, and all of these things are there. All of the problems that we are concerned about, yes, it's there. My argument is that it is not at the scale that we worry about. And we maybe don't need to spend as much of our energy worrying about Messianics as we do. And I know maybe it's not every segment of the Jewish community, but at least the segments that I run in, there's a lot of anxiety over these folks and anger. And so I want to sort of look at the three issues we have and not say that they're not fair, but say that the scale is not as great as we worry about. So when it comes to appropriation, and we kind of already talked about this a lot, but religion is syncretic. There is appropriation that's happening, but I wonder if appropriation is always as harmful as we might worry about. Sometimes it's sort of embarrassing to look at when you see someone put belt loop seat on, right? That's a little bit embarrassing. But I don't know if it rises to the same level of appropriation of outright stealing like a recipe from an indigenous culture and then making millions off of it, right? I don't think it rises to that. And also, religion is syncretic. It's syncretic. It's hard to stop that from happening. I see that you disagree with me, John, and you're itching to say something.
How much money are they making?
Oh, you want me to answer that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly, but as I said, I don't know exactly how much money they're making off of WCC specifically, and there are definitely people who make money off of this, but a lot of them are making money in sites that are simply like Christian versions of Etsy, and so are not making all that much. And there are lots of Israelis, Jews, who are making money off of them by making this stuff.
I mean, the talk about harm, I mean, harm, there doesn't necessarily have to be extreme harm, in my opinion, for it to be wrong. Like, things can be bad and not cause deep amounts of harm, in my opinion. But also, like, you see the harm in, like, Mike Pence after the Tree of Life shooting and stuff like that. This sort of thing breaking into the mainstream and him being like, oh, here's this rabbi, and to give a blessing, when there's like thousands of rabbis in the United States, I'm sure, who, well, thousands of actual rabbis who could have actually done something like that, so.
And I don't wanna, let me reiterate that I don't mean to say that there is no harm ever, and what Mike Pence did with, quote unquote Rabbi Rick Jacobs after the shooting, yeah, that was a problem. I think that Pence had a lot more power, certainly did as vice president when he did that, and he is a representative of traditional evangelicalism. And so a lot of the harm is coming from that arena, even with him propping it up. My argument is that it's not, even with this rabbi there, supposed rabbi, right? The one who's truly causing the harm in this situation is not Rick Jacobs, it's Mike Pence.
I missed that one. What happened?
So in the aftermath of the Tree of Life shooting, then Vice President Pence appeared at a campaign rally with a messianic rabbi to give an invocation and a prayer for the victims of the Tree of Life shooting. And I wrote a thing at the time, and like, yeah, it was infuriating, but the locus of power was with the vice president and with evangelicalism, not with Messianic Judaism. In fact, this particular rabbi was so evangelical that his union, right, his the rabbinic organization within it, this Messianic rabbinic organization that ordained him, disavowed him for being too Christian. So that's an important distinction to make about that. You're right, there is harm, absolutely, but is our concern over is the harm enough from Messianics enough to divert our attention from what I argue is the true concern, which is robust evangelicalism. Okay. Also, I don't know how you can stop syncretism. This is just how religion operates. I don't know how you can do it. This was always going to happen in the United States. I said that early on, right? With the U.S. focused on Exodus, for the very earliest days of the first colonists in this country, saying we're the new Israelites, with Exodus appealing to, which we'll talk about in a few at some point in this class, appealing to both white Americans as an idea of through manifest destiny, and also to Black Americans through liberty from slavery, right? The Jewish narrative is deeply embedded in American consciousness. And then you have the whole Jesus people movement, going back to the roots of Jesus's authentic religion. It was always going to happen. We were never getting away from this. It was going to happen. And I'm surprised it didn't happen sooner, to be honest. It probably didn't happen sooner because of like deeply ingrained anti-Semitism. But that's just what religion does. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be vigilant when it becomes harmful, but I don't think we can stop it. I certainly know that we can stop it by yelling at people online, which I think a lot of us kind of want to do. All right, so the other issue, supersessionism. I do want to say that since I wrote this lecture, supersessionism has risen to become an issue again. So there are Christian churches that are scaling this back. Absolutely. I've met a number of pastors through the Interfaith Movement who Jenna works with, who are not focused on supersessionism and recognize the problems of supersessionism. But by and large, despite what clergy within these more progressive Christianities are interested in doing, supersessionism is so deeply embedded in Christian consciousness that you have to actively preach against it, not just not mention it, but actively preach against it in order to chip away. And many progressive churches and mainstream churches just aren't doing that enough, while evangelical churches and conservative churches and traditional Catholic churches are actively, unapologetically engaging in it again. And so supersessionism is an issue. But again, I want to argue that the issue is with this type of hyper-masculine, hyper-robust Christianity that's emerged in the past 5-10 years, where this is coming from, not a handful of small messianic congregations. Daryl, here you go.
Okay, so the Christians think they superseded the Jewish, at least the Jewish religion in those days. And we know the Jewish religion today is really rabbinic Judaism, which came after Jesus. So therefore, shouldn't supersessionism be used against the Christians that we're the new religion?
I mean, no, we're not. Like historically, we precede them, but also even if you want to make a logical argument, it doesn't matter. It is a cultural and sociological issue that sort of is embedded in cultural consciousness, and gets passed on from generation to generation, right? So I understand the point you're trying to make, but it just won't work. Because people need to consciously get rid of the things that they've always believed, and they have always believed that Jesus is the savior of mankind. Jesus can only be the savior of mankind if Jesus supersedes, if his story supersedes everyone else, namely the people whom he came from. So, and that's an emotional argument. A logical argument won't work. Which is true of anybody, really, right? The other issue is that of I want to sort of speed along here because we have 10 minutes left, and I want to get to my last couple slides. But yeah, so with fear of attrition, I sort of already mentioned this. We lose so many more people just to nothing than we do to Christianity itself, let alone messianism. Yeah, there are people who become messianic. It does happen, but I would imagine that the numbers pale in comparison, right, to the actual attrition, to just secularity, just not doing anything, just I'm not religious, I don't need to go to temple, whatever. I don't want to take my kids to Sunday school, I'd rather hang out and sleep, right? That's what we lose people to by, I'm guessing, exponentially larger numbers.
Or sometimes people say, oh, I was born Jewish, but I'm not.
Yeah. But then, so people say I was born Jewish, but I'm not practicing. Was like, okay, so what does that mean?
Right.
And so you hear people say things like, oh, what, and then when asked to be on these surveys, what makes you feel Jewish? They'll say, eating pastrami. Like, really? Really? But no, I'm not joking. I'm not being facetious here. This is something that when the Pew Research Survey asked people what made them feel Jewish, those who were disaffiliated said Jewish food by huge numbers. And don't get me wrong, I feel connection to my heritage through our food as well. But the pastrami sandwich, no matter how high it is not going to hold up identity forever.
Okay, in fairness, pastrami is that good. But in fairness, though, I think like the whole I'm Jewish but not practicing thing has been, there have always been Jews like that, and that's kind of by nature of it being an ethno-religious movement. Because if you can be something ethnically but not religiously, or religiously but not ethnically, there's always been people like that. And obviously there's more converts happening now because of the internet. But, there's one other point I was wanting to make. But also you're seeing recently too, the upswing in traditional practices amongst Jews who wouldn't necessarily have been practicing them 30 years ago or stuff like that. Like an education director wanting to do a tefillin wrapping class for the children in the Reform synagogue. Or,
Just to add to something that John said, I think one problem is also there's a lot of confusion in the US about what an ethno-religion actually is. Because Christianity is the dominant religion and it's a universalist religion.
And the other side of that, though, is what not only is there confusion about what an religion is, there's a widespread belief among loosely affiliated Jews or non-practicing Jews, or even Jews who are affiliated and practicing, where the belief is that religion is all about faith. And so if I don't believe in the God of the Torah and what happens in the Torah, then I guess I'm not religious. Yeah, there's that issue as well, which is the other side of that coin. Darryl, here you go.
I'm gonna throw a little curveball here, which I'm good at. It's a lot of Jews, because a lot of Jews become non-practicing. Well, I know two Jews sitting right here who grew up, what you say, non-families, non-practicing Jews, didn't go to Sunday school, didn't learn anything, and we're here right now. So what went wrong with us?
Yeah, this is not universal, of course. This is not universal. We're talking about large numbers here, right? And
That would.
well, let me come back to because I want to keep going with mine. We're running out of time, and I do want to finish this this class. So you can tell me after class. Okay, so I want to argue that, let's see, why should we not be as concerned about messianics? Again, I don't think that they have that big of a threat to our actual numbers. I think most Jews see them and are like, really, this is not authentic to me. I don't want no part of this. I'm sure they get a few here and there, but I don't think that there is much of a threat. Also, most Messianic churches and congregations, with the exception of Jews for Jesus, and those who are more aligned with evangelical Christianity and Pentecostalism, most of them aren't really interested in converting Jews. They're not. But so there's some research behind this. If you're interested in the books, there are books that I'm referencing here. I'm not just making this up. But there is scholarly work on this. A number of interviews, ethnographies, and surveys that this scholar, I forget her name, in a book called Passing Over Easter, that was the name of her text. She determined that most of the congregations that are considering themselves Messianic just want to sort of be Messianic. They want to take Jewish practices and enriches their lives, their spiritual lives, but they don't really care about converting Jews, with the exception of groups like the Jews for Jesus, right? That would be the exception. Generally speaking, it would be left up to individual members. So if there's someone in a congregation who wants to do it, like maybe they will, like anyone, but any Christian can do that too. But by and large, they tend to shy away from that because there is such an enormous resistance within the Jewish community. We're really good at it. We put up our barricades, right? They're not, literally. Yeah, sometimes literally, like if you actually want them not to come in. We have successfully kept Messianic Judaism at bay. So those few Messianic Jews who might want to talk to Jews, and again, aren't members of Jews for Jesus, those few are intimidated by us. We are intimidating. We are. When we come out against Messianics, we are very intimidating. I'm not saying that we shouldn't be. I'm just saying that because of that, they don't necessarily want to engage with us. And okay, cool. And finally, hold on 1 second. I want to sort of rush through this and then we'll go over by a few minutes. Finally, their practice, we say that it's fake, but from a religious studies perspective, it's real to them. They are genuine. Most of them are genuine in their belief. We may disagree with it, and I'm pushing back against the argument that they're only out to convert us. No. Most of them truly believe what they believe and are practicing genuinely. Is it Judaism? No, it's not Judaism. Of course not. And we as Jews have a right to define our boundaries of identity. We have a right to do that. Absolutely. We're a marginalized community in a Christian-dominated society, and we have a right to determine who we are and what we consider to be Judaism, even if there's going to be different disagreements within our community. But these people are not trying to convert us by and large. They are practicing genuinely, even if we don't consider that, again, rightfully, even though we don't consider that Judaism. All right. I do want to say also that, especially amid rising anti-Semitism, Jewish or not, Messianic communities face this rising specter of anti-Semitism. So I have two examples right here. The first, there was a bomb plot in 2018 where where the FBI foiled an attack on a synagogue, a bombing, and it was a Messianic synagogue that was targeted. And then the San Bernardino shooting that happened back in 2015, there's evidence that the shooters who were inspired by ISIS at the time, right? So it was an Islamist motivation. It was a combination of Islamism and workplace violence. So the man who did this, he and his wife, he had gotten into an argument with a coworker about religion, and the coworker was a Messianic Jew. And there's strong evidence there was evidence that came out that one of the motivations for engaging in the San Bernardino shooting was to kill this Jew, what he saw as a Jewish person. He didn't make the distinction between Messianic and non-Messianic, right? So that's something that is worth mentioning as well. Again, it doesn't mean you have to embrace them or invite them to Passover, but I think it complicates the situation. Okay, so there is evidence that Messianic Jews use Messianic Judaism as a stepping stone to convert to Judaism. There seems to be significant numbers of people who go from Christianity to Judaism by going through Messianic Judaism first. Not everybody does that, but many more people seem to do that than the other way, than Jews who become Christian through Messianic Judaism. And most recently, this becomes an opportunity. So I have the Sholo mass conversion. This is something that happened a few months ago in Sholo, Arizona. There was a Messianic congregation that, through their studies, the rabbi, right, he called himself a rabbi, he decided, and some of his followers decided that they were not practicing an authentic way. They needed to become Jewish. So they reached out to a rabbi in Scottsdale, of all places. And this rabbi, by the way, this rabbi is one of Jenna's ex-boyfriends. So, and I've met him before. I've met him. He's a very nice guy. He's a very cool guy, and he's the one who presided over this conversion, this conservative rabbi, right? Rabbi Andy Green. This is huge. It was about 10 or 12 people. It is a mass conversion. Do you know how rare there are mass conversions to Judaism? It is very rare. I think there was like the Khazarian conversion among the Khazarian elites. That was the last time it happened. Before that, the Maccabees forced Edomites to be Jewish, right? So that's what. And then after these two things, Rabbi Andy Green in Scottsdale got 10 folks from Sholo, Arizona, to become Jewish. I'm joking, but it's significant. It's significant. It means there's an opportunity. There's an opportunity to share Judaism with people. I think that when I see the sort of vitriol online towards Messianic Jews, and I understand it, of course, but I wonder if we're missing an opportunity to actually talk about our tradition and welcome people in if they're going to authentically practice, right? And we have mechanisms in our conversion practices to screen, right, people who might be doing it inauthentically. Okay, so the last point I want to make is that the extreme focus on Messianic Jews obscures the real problem today. The real problem is this robust, politicized, nationalist evangelicalism and traditional radical Catholicism, which basically sees Christianity as ascendant, Christianity as a political force, Christianity as superseding and also more, what's the word? Both superseding and also better than, I think I'm losing the language here. Better than other traditions, and as being necessary to spread to all people to make this a quote unquote Christian nation. This is where the problem lies, right? And here we have our 3 points, right? And so what are some examples of appropriation and supersessionism and attrition when it comes to this type of Christianity? Again, not Messianic Judaism, but this type of Christianity. Well, when it comes to appropriation, on January 6th, on the riots and the insurrection on January 6th, you had evangelical groups who were blowing shofars as a as a war cry, basically. In the way that Joshua, the leader of, the first judge, right, in the way that Joshua, successor of Moses, had the Israelites blow the shofar out when going around Jericho to like destroy the city of Jericho. They marched around the capital blowing shofars. That's dangerous. It works people up. It makes them violent, right? Because it is originally we blow it joyously on Rosh Hashanah. Some of these folks aren't doing that. It's a problem in terms of supersessionism, not just to say that Christianity is better, but to say that actually, if we're the new covenant, then Jews aren't real Jews. We're the true heirs of God's chosen people. We're the actual Israelites. The Jews rejected it. We're the real ones. And so we have a problem with these people who have refused and are not chosen by God, are not, smiled on by God. So now we need to ask the question, what are we going to do with them, right? This is some of the language that I'm seeing coming out of evangelical spaces these days, and evangelical online spaces, and sometimes not online. We're hearing it more and more in other places as well. And then I'm going to mention this last one, and I'll give you the mic, John. Finally, when it comes to fear of attrition, it's a fear, because we encounter this, many of us may fear publicly displaying our Jewishness. We may still do it, right? Out of a sense of showing strength and obligation and all of that. But I won't like lie to you. When we were doing Shabbat in the park over the summer, I was always concerned about it. And there was a point where there was a woman who lived in the area who I did some digging, right? Because she came and she like gave out like flyers and stuff. She was a Tran Catholic. And she came talking about Yeshua and the Messiah, Jesus being the true Messiah. Because I actually like stand aside and was like, okay, Sean, go talk to her. Okay, fine, I'll go talk to her. I go and talk to her, and she's talking about, well, maybe you can come to the Messiah, Yeshua. And she was not Messianic, guys, she was Catholic. And at first I thought her church was some sort of breakaway. No, it's a small Catholic church in Plum Valley. So the concern that I have, and I want you to sort of think about this and maybe internalize this. The problem is not with Messianics, the problem is with this type of Christianity that is ascendant right now. And on that happy note, I guess that what I wanted to leave as a happy note is that maybe Messianics aren't something to fear as much, and maybe it's an opportunity to get more people to become Jewish, right?
And to lean into some other fears.
And yeah, instead I drop this kind of stuff on you. All right, John, here you go.
I mean, there can be multiple problems.
But I don't see many Messianics who are bringing this into the halls of power.
Well, yeah, so other than piggybacking off of Mike Pence.
Mike Pence is a darling of evangelical, or was. So, yeah.
But the whole superstition Jews are not the real Jews thing. It reminds me of, I was at my uncle's funeral a few years ago. And this one woman who was a regular of the donut shop that my uncle frequented was there at the funeral. And talking to her, she starts talking to me, and she's like, oh, well, yeah, well, I see myself as a complete Jew because I believe in Jesus. And
which is, and I've not heard many Messianics say that. I have heard many Christians say that. The first time I heard that was in like 2005, Ann Coulter said. Right? That was the first time I'd ever heard that. There's a name you haven't heard in a while.
Not as much of a while as that one.
Yeah. So, but yeah, I hear it because it's, if you are this type of Christian and you want to sort of take the mantle of Jewishness, that's all you have to say. You don't have to go through the ritual. You don't have to put on talit. You don't have to do any of that stuff. That's not if you have to, actually. Or many of them they have to. As the ones that choose to do that, I don't know if they can hear me online right now. I was saying that if you're Messianic, for some of these Christians, they don't have to go through all like the accoutrement and rituals of Jewish life. Many Messianics do that. And it's those Messianics who take on the more serious mantles of Jewish practice, like keeping kosher and wearing tzitzit, actual tzitzit, not just the belt loops. and following the holidays and not driving on Shabbos, those are the ones that tend to eventually convert, right? Not the people who are just like, I'm a completed Jew. All right, any other questions or comments? What about online? Just shout out. Do you have a question if you're online?
Nah, I'm good.
Okay, all right. So I then will bring our discussion on Messianic Judaism to a close, and we will look at more either, I would say, alternative Judaisms that are considered Jewish by the mainstream Jewish community, like Chabad, and also more, those are sort of on the border, right? Like Jewish science and the Kabbalah movement. And I can't wait to talk about that. So we will talk about that in the upcoming weeks. Now, the week before Halloween, that's the 24th, we're going to talk about spiritualism. So we will divert out of discussing Judaism. We're going to talk about ghosts and seances, because that is an American tradition, and we are also all Americans. And I think that is it's one of my favorite things to talk about, and it keeps with the spookiness of the season. One thing I want to say before I let everyone go, as usual with my college classes, the 31st, we will not be meeting because it's Halloween, and I will be taking my daughter. Okay, all right. Yeah, right. Bye,
I will
everyone.
also be trick or treating. I'll be taking myself.
Connecting this to your other class.
Bye, everyone.
we're doing.
Night, Jenna. Love you.
So are you saying that?
Take care, everyone. Thanks.
Absolutely.
Are we at the top